With the best brand of football in Idaho, this is the 8-Man Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
That's right. Welcome in. It is another edition. It is the final edition of the Idaho 8-Man Prepcast for the 2022 season. My name is Brandon Baney. We are joined, as always, by Will Hoenike. Will, what's going on? It's been a couple weeks. How you doing?
Yeah, I thought you forgot about me. I thought you just didn't want to hang out with me anymore, but it's good to be back.
Yeah, so I know our 8-man diehards are like, where the heck have you two been these last 2 weeks? How are we going to know what to look for in these semifinal and championship games? So here's the story. 2 weeks ago, I was busy. I had personal stuff going on. Long story short, very soon, my wife and I are going to be moving from Pocatello. So I live in Pocatello currently. I think most people knew that, but we're going to be moving to Coeur d'Alene. She got a transfer with her job, and so we were kind of trying to take care of some of that stuff, and I just didn't have time to do the Prepcast 2 weeks ago. And then last week,
Hootney, Wallace, Mullen, those Lakeside, those D1 schools should be loving you right now.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun. I really hope we can go do some stuff at Lakeside, especially because they got that brand new turf field put in this year. Did you see that, Will?
I have not, but you know what they have in Plummer that most 8-man towns in this state do not have that makes it rise up the ladder a little bit? They have a Zips. And you need to find your way, if you've never been, you need to find your way to a Zips. And everybody says, oh, I love In-N-Out, I love Smash Burger, I love Whataburger, whatever. It is all battling for second place behind Zips.
Yeah, they put in I've heard of Zips. There's a couple of different locations up in that North Idaho area.
Moscow, Coeur d'Alene. It's really prominent in eastern Washington, and then there's a few in Idaho. There used to be one here. I live outside of Boise. There used to be one in Boise, and there was a huge road construction project that basically blocked the entrance to the restaurant. So all of a sudden, nobody could get you. You had to have you had to go ninja just to get in there to get, a bacon cheeseburger and some tater tots. So poor restaurant died a slow and painful death, withered on the vine. Small piece of me died that day too.
That's funny. So yes, in Lakeside, they had this beautiful new turf facility. It's called the Core Center, and it's in Worley. And so it's turf field. I know the Lakeside football team was able to play there at least once. This is something that was done in conjunction with the Coeur d'Alene Tribe and
That's awesome.
The health department, or the health and wellness center there. And there was even a girls soccer match this year. Lake City and Moscow played a girls soccer match on this turf field in Worley. They met up and played a soccer match there. So I really hope we are able to go do some cool stuff.
Very
for
cool.
Lakeside.
Very
I know
cool.
there's up there. So anyways, so that's what's going on with me. I kind of sandwiched the trip to Coeur d'Alene around that Mullen playoff game. I went and did the playoff game in Mullen, and we kind of scheduled it around my wife and what she needed for her job transfer. And anyways, so that's where I've been the last 2 weeks. And then last week we did our state preview show live, and that was kind of the placeholder. Yes, we had a lot of good stuff to talk about there. So anyways, that's where we've been the last 2 weeks, but we're here one final time to wrap up what was a pretty interesting championship weekend. We had two champions get crowned, Oakley and Kendrick. I think we have to start with Kendrick because that was the game that had a lot of the drama where, coming in, Kendrick is playing Dietrich, and everybody, Kendrick's a big juggernaut, and, first team to 60 wins, and, Kendrick should roll. And I told everybody, I said, hey, look, 2 years ago, Dietrich played Carey in the state championship game, and Carey was the big juggernaut and the heavy favorite, and Dietrich was the underdog, and they came through and won. Last year, Kendrick played Carey in the championship, and Carey was the favorite. They were the perennial power, and Kendrick was kind of an afterthought, and Kendrick came through and won. I said, don't be surprised if Dietrich comes in less heralded and is still able to push Kendrick to the brink, and they certainly did that. This was a really fun game and a wild back and forth affair.
Yeah, I was tracking the game, wasn't able to be there. And I was talking earlier in the week with a number of people just kind of getting their feel for the game. And the one thing that came through was, here are these teams, Dietrich, there are weeks that, I'm sorry, not Dietrich, Kendrick, there are weeks they could have scored 100 points if they wanted to. Dietrich, probably the same. They probably had a couple games where they could have pushed 100 points. But people were telling me, hey, these guys are going to cancel each other out a little bit. It's going to be some strength on some strength. So don't be surprised if it comes down to a defensive stop. And lo and behold, what do we have? We have a goal line interception with what, a minute to go, and that winds up potentially, it thwarted a potential game-tying touchdown and conversion situation for Dietrich. So, I'm not going to hurt myself patting myself on the back, because it wasn't necessarily an original thought, but there were people out there talking about it all along. Oh yeah, I mean, it could turn into one of those 68, 62 type, just big play, big play, big play, big play, big play type games. But the more I talked to people, the more I got the sense that they were expecting just a good football game. Just a good football game. And a 42-34 8-man football game would be akin to, say, 24-17 11-man game, where you're making some plays on offense, you're doing some good things, but you're also doing some really good things on defense. And both teams did. And both teams obviously did some work on special teams as well. Dietrich's not even in position to get that last touchdown if they don't recover an onside kick. So, a tremendous football game. Dietrich, obviously nothing to hang their heads about, but holy cow. I mean, here it is, Kendrick again. They've won 2 in a row. And we talked a lot last year. One senior, right? One senior on that team last year. You know how many they have this year? 4. So almost that whole team is back again next year. And so, buckle up. We might be talking about the Tigers version 3.0 1 year from today.
Yeah, and what it came down to was Dietrich was down 2 scores late. Cody Power orchestrates this drive. This all happened in real time, but I believe Case Robertson was the intended receiver. Anyways, the intended receiver fell down. The Kendrick defensive back fell down. And all of a sudden, Connor Perkins was there, and he just kind of caught it on this like fire drill play where the top defender and the top receiver both fell down. Perkins makes the grab. It's a 41-yard touchdown. Dietrich's within 4, but they've got to go or they're within 8, but they've got to go for the onside kick with like 1:04 to play. And it goes right off the chest of Nate Twite, the freshman for Kendrick. And I think I've been calling him Jack Twite all week on our other podcasts, and I apologize for that. I don't know why I had Jack stuck in my head, maybe because I was thinking of Jack Silflo. But anyways, Nate Twite.
The one that I've heard Twite and Tweet. I've heard both of those versions, so I'm glad you got it.
Yes. So, yeah, it's Twite. It went off of his chest. The onside kick went off of his chest. Brody Torgerson recovered it for Dietrich, and it was like, boom, 20 yards to Robertson, 15 yards to Robertson, and Dietrich was like at the 9-yard line with like 40 seconds to play still. And now you're thinking, boy, if they score quickly enough, Kendrick might have a chance to like win this thing in regulation. Cody Power drops back to pass with like 30 seconds to go. He's hit as he throws it. It's a little bit behind the receiver, and it's intercepted at the goal line by the Tigers. Thus, they're able to run out the clock and win the game. Who comes up with the interception?
If I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes, it is Twite. He goes from GOAT to hero like that. And that's what makes 8-man football so great, right?
Oh, it makes it a ton of fun. And again, you think about it as it's a lot of times it's the same, you're talking about maybe 10 or 11 guys who are doing the bulk of everything. Offense, defense, and some special teams. And, Kendrick was, and this is something that's funny. They were missing one of their best players. Dallas Morgan wasn't playing. And you needed somebody to step up. Brad Boyer steps up, comes in, and he makes some plays and does some good things. And you're like, oh, okay, senior getting his chance. Oh, no, he's just a sophomore. I don't know where they're coming up with all these people, but I asked Zane Hobart just the other night. I'm like, okay, when does the well run dry? And he just kind of sheepishly shrugged and said, we got a couple more good classes coming here. So, if the coaches, if they can stay healthy and the coaches can keep them focused, this could be quite the run. And it's funny that we're talking about Kendrick on the run. Okay. Oakley's won 3 in a row now. And I don't know how much that resonates with some people that they've won 3 in a row, whereas everyone's looking at Kendrick and thinking, we've got this burgeoning, Boston Celtics of the 1950s, UCLA winning 10 straight NCAA championships or something. It's kind of a funny dichotomy when you think about it like that, because Kendrick deserves all the attention they're getting. I mean, it's a fantastic program, it's a fantastic team, and they just won a fantastic game against another fantastic team in Dietrich. But man, I'll tell you, that Oakley thing, 3 straight state championships, three in a row. What's going on in this state right now?
A lot of dominant dynasty type, Skyline and Sugar Salem and now Oakley, certainly, and Kendrick. And
Sugar Salem, how about, would Homedale be about the happiest school in the world if Sugar Salem decided it was going to take its football program to the NFL or something like that? Because I bet you they're getting real tired of seeing the Diggers.
Seriously, I feel so bad for Homedale fans. 5 times in a row they've lost to Sugar. 4 of those 5 have been in the championship. The other one came in the semis. Not that makes it any less.
Now, I say this good-naturedly. I live in Parma. I don't feel that bad for Homedale. Conference rivals, man. Conference rivals runs, and I'm just joking. I know a lot of good people down there, but anyway, I sidetracked. It's my fault.
No, that's fine. That's funny. Okay, back to this Kendrick Dietrich game real quick, just to put a wrap on it. You're right. Dallas Morgan, great 2-way lineman, just a junior, out with a knee injury or a leg injury of some kind. Boyer steps in and starts for him. And really, if you go back to the Camas County game in the quarterfinals, Kendrick was without Dallas Morgan and Jack Silflo. They were missing 2 of their 3 offensive and defensive linemen, and they still shut down the Mushers run game and controlled the line of scrimmage. And it just shows you that there really isn't a drop off between the first string unit to the second string unit. Some 8-man teams don't even have a second string unit, and Kendrick does.
And that's just it. I mean, you go anywhere else in 1A Division II football, and I mean this as a compliment to Kendrick, not a slight to anybody else, and say, okay, you're going into the playoffs, and we're going to take 2 of your 3 offensive and defensive linemen. You know what we call those teams? As a rule of thumb, one and done. You're going to have a hard time replacing 2 offensive and defensive linemen playing state caliber competition. And Kendrick just said, okay, well, we'll just go win state. We're cool.
Yeah, no worries. So for Dietrich, where do they go from here? They are going to lose 7 seniors to graduation and some big ones, right? Cody Power, Case Robertson, Peyton Sneddon. I think quietly, maybe their biggest loss is going to be Dason Pisano, the great 2-way lineman. So they're going to lose some guys for sure, but it's not like the cupboard's completely bare. Connor Perkins will be back. He may move to quarterback. He may play out at wide receiver. They've got some options at QB. They could go with him. They could go with Wyatt Sneddon, who is Peyton's younger brother. He was a freshman this year. They still have Emmett Zimmers back to play center and anchor the defensive line. So, it's not completely bare, but some of those younger guys that are freshmen and sophomores are going to have to step up in their first introduction to varsity football. Brody Torgerson's another good 2-way lineman coming back. So the line looks like it's going to be good again. Can these skill guys come along for Dietrich next year?
Yeah. And you can't take a Cody Power out of a lineup and a Peyton Sneddon out of a lineup. You can't take guys like that out of a lineup and not feel the effect. But the saving grace right now, if you're a Dietrich fan and if you're a hardcore football guy for the Blue Devils, is that you can look at that line and say, you know what, there's a little bit of a grace period here, a little bit of an insulation in that, whoever steps in at quarterback, be it Perkins, be it someone else, hopefully they won't be running for their lives. You know what they mean? The game will be allowed to progress for them at a natural level, because they'll be able to run the ball and they'll have time to throw. And I think that'll really help Dietrich. And, that league in general is going to have a different look next year, because Castleford, I believe they had 12 players on their roster. If I'm not mistaken, 7 of them were seniors. So there's going to be a big turnover in Castleford. Camas County should still be pretty solid. The Smiths are both back. There's a good group of Mushers players back. Hanson has some good athletes back as well, but there's no reason to think that Dietrich, there may be a little bit of a learning curve. I don't know that they're going into the state championship game at 11-0 or anything, but there's no reason to think that this particular group of Dietrich kids can't go out and compete for a pretty good playoff spot again next year.
Yeah, and Hagerman's got a kid that you highlighted in one of your 3-star columns.
Guy Kendall.
Yeah, he'll be a good one to keep an eye on next year as well. One last note about Dietrich, and then we'll move on to the 1A D1 championship. We got kind of a cool email from the grandmother of Hudson Lucero before the championship game, and kind of sharing some background on his story. And so we talked about it during the championship broadcast, but in case people didn't tune in, I wanted to share the story here too, because it's, you look at Hudson Lucero and he's played now for 3 teams in 4 years of his high school career. And you're going, oh, what's going on there? He must've gotten recruited and all this. No, he played his first 2 years at Richfield, which, as we know, has been a program that's really been struggling with numbers the past couple of years. They've done this hybrid varsity JV schedule the past several seasons. So Hudson played his freshman and sophomore year at Richfield. Then his junior year, he shows up to an off-season meeting and there's like 6 kids. And he's doing the math like, well, we need 8. There's only 6. Mm-hmm. Are we gonna have football? What's gonna go on there? So he decided to go down the road to play at Shoshone for his junior season. Shoshone had enough players, and they were competing at a JV only level 2 years ago. They were a varsity member this year, but it was a JV only schedule in 2 years ago in his junior season. So you don't have to sit out, right? If you're playing just JV competition, you don't have to worry about eligibility and all that stuff. So he had a chance to play and played the full year for Shoshone. And then his senior year, he decided, you know what, I want to try and play for Dietrich, and, put in the application, did everything the correct way, was approved to play. And that's how Hudson Lucero became a Dietrich Blue Devil. And he was a pretty key member of that team. Great defensive end, was a good goal line back as well. And so kind of an interesting story. You don't see that a lot, where a kid's played for 3 schools in 4 years. And usually that has a negative connotation with it. Like, oh boy, this kid's got baggage and can't stick at any schools. But this is the opposite. This is just a kid who wants to play football. And they've got a chance.
Rural Idaho, obviously, it can be tough. You mentioned Richfield. They've given it a go for years, and I applaud the heck, and I wish them success. But there are times where they're showing up for games with 8 kids to play 8-man football. And so some people may say, well, if Lucero stayed, then they'd have 9. Well, that's an easy way to look at it, sure. But I also understand the competitive nature of it. And it's not like, maybe a better way to put this is, it's not like he transferred to Kendrick and lives with an aunt and uncle. And, there are stories of things like that have happened, not just in football, not just in Idaho, all over the place. He stayed within driving distance. And as long, like you said, as long as it's done correctly, as long as the proper protocols are followed, the proper paperwork is filed, and the proper approvals are granted, hey, go have fun, kid. Go play. Go play for a state championship. I mean, that's something they're not going to be able to take away from him.
Definitely. So great career for him, and hopefully the future has big things in store for Hudson Lucero and everybody who is graduating this year. 1A D1 level, Oakley rolls 58-20 over Grace. The Hornets 3 times in a row now have won the 1A D1 championship. So for the championship games on IdahoSports.com, the games at Holt Arena, we added a new wrinkle to our broadcast coverage this year for the championships. We had a sideline. You
decided to show off. Just say it. You decided to show off a little.
Well, because we don't have a monopoly on broadcasting, right? There are other entities out there that broadcast these playoff games as well. So, we're thinking to ourselves, how are we going to enhance our product and make sure people want to check us out instead of the competitor? I think right off the bat, we have I'm just going to brag here. We have the best announcers in the state of Idaho, which helps, and we know the players and the teams.
$0.00 probably makes some decisions too.
Definitely. And so, but we want to give people the best product. And so adding a sideline reporter this year actually was a really cool deal. We were able to interview all of the coaches pre-game. We were able to interview our IdahoSports.com player of the game live on the field right there after it was all over. We had sideline reports throughout. Paul Kingsbury was our sideline reporter for the D2 championship. He was like in the stands talking to Kendrick parents and, had a pretty cool story about a kid from Kendrick, Mason Kimberline. His nickname is Moose, and none of the coaches knew why. So we asked, like, Paul, can you go find out why they call him Moose? And turns out it was because when he was, you think of people named Moose and you think of like big blockheads and, bigger guys. And well, it was the opposite. It was when he was a younger, he was kind of tall and lanky and kind of looked like a moose in that way. So they called him Moose, and it stuck. But anyways, we were down on the field prior to the D1 championship, and I was doing an interview with Brendan Jones, the coach from Oakley. I said, all right, what are the keys to the game tonight? And he said, we need to be physical. We need to dominate the line of scrimmage. And he said, we need to be violent, which kind of took me back for a second. But basically, he's not saying that we want to like be dirty. He's just saying we want them to know we're here to play. And Oakley's had that reputation the past 3 years where they are a physical defense. They're going to tackle you really, really hard. And that's exactly what they did in that championship game. So,
yeah, no, it was that first half. So Oakley gets out to the lead, and then Grace, to their credit, responds. And you're at a 24-12, I believe, at halftime was the score. And then it swings, opening kickoff of the second half. Bryce Sevier with the kickoff return, and then he gets that touchdown run later in the quarter, and all of a sudden it's gone from 24-12 to 38-12. And, even at an 8-man level, 26 points or 10 points, and you've got one quarter to play. What are you going to choose? And to me, that's one of the great storylines of the championship week at the 8-man level is the two players who had arguably the biggest impacts in their team's wins. You have Sawyer Hewitt for Kendrick, and then you have Bryce Sevier for Oakley. Those were kids that had to overcome some injuries and some adversity just to be in that game. And then to go out there and to make big plays to help their team win a state championship that's the kind of thing that small town legends are made of. And both of them are going to be back next year. Sawyer Hewitt will be a junior, Bryce Sevier will be a senior, but Bry, they were not sure, how much they were going to get from him this year, period. And he started working in a little bit. He was trying. He really wanted to be out there, obviously. And, he was trying to work in, and they were using him a little bit here. They had packages for him there, and they had situations for him. But then him to be able to just kind of jump in a state championship game and score, 3 touchdowns, but 2 critical touchdowns, because at 24-12 in the second half, that's anybody's football game. And, one bad bounce, one missed assignment, one whatever it is, completely changes the narrative. And so for Sevier, who missed so much of the season, to come in and make those plays in that moment at that time, that just had to feel fantastic for that young man.
Yeah, and so he had been, I'd noticed this the past couple of weeks, they'd really been using him on defense, especially at defensive tackle, lining up right over the center. And I thought, okay, that's where he's most important to Oakley. And they're still kind of keeping him on a pitch count on offense. But we actually saw him kind of fully incorporated into the offense for that championship game. And Coach Jones has said this numerous times throughout the year. He said it before the game last week that basically Bryce Sevier is worth a couple of touchdowns each game. Now that could be on offense, as we saw 3 times, or on defense, stopping a couple of touchdowns here or there. And he's also said, Bryce is good for a couple of big impact plays per game as well on both sides. And we saw that. Sure. Yeah, come through. So it was a nice way for Bryce Sevier to cap off his junior season. He won't get any postseason accolades or anything, but he won a championship. So that's all good for him.
I'm sure he'll take a state championship as a consolation prize.
Yes, for sure. So Oakley is a team that loses some guys to graduation, right? Ethan Torabau is gone. Pragetzer is gone. Porter Pickett will graduate.
Houston Bingham, that's a young man that had himself one heck of a season on both sides of the football.
Yeah, Keyshawn Crocker, who's kind of a big hitter defensively, will be gone. They're going to lose Porter Wells on the line. So, I mean, they're losing some impact guys for sure. But again, kind of like Dietrich, the cupboard isn't completely bare. Bryce Severe will be back. Isaac Cranny will return as well. They've got Cooper Beck to anchor both lines. They've got a really good DB that didn't get a ton of accolades this year, Riley Mullard, who was a great corner for Oakley down the stretch. So they've got some guys to build around. Everybody wants to know, well, who's going to be the QB? There was only one other quarterback listed on the roster. That was freshman Jonathan Hines. But this year's quarterback, Porter Pickett, was not listed as a quarterback the prior year. So it could be anybody, really.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, Kyler Robinson played a little bit of quarterback last season and a little bit this year where he played elsewhere on the field, much like Porter Pickett did last year. But, let's say Robinson winds up being the quarterback and you've got Severe in the backfield and you've got Cranny and Duncan on the outside. I mean, you find somebody to give that quarterback some time to throw, they're going to be a dangerous team again next year. And it's, it has a really interesting look, and it's, you're getting in the way too early. We're being like the people that are, we're projecting who's going to win next year's World Series when it's not even Christmas the year before yet. But you look at 1A Division I and you ask yourself, okay, let's go up in the White Pine. Camiai's got some players back. Clearwater Valley has some players back. Prairie has some players back. But none of them leap off the page as, oh, that's the team. And then you come down to District 3. Wilder should be better. They'll get their quarterback back who missed much of the season injured, and they were able to groom a couple other young athletes when he was out, so they should be better this upcoming year. You get down into District 4. Raft River, wake me up when they're not competitive. You know what I mean? Cary takes a bit of a hit with some guys that they lose, but they have some players back. Moral of the story here is I have a hard time looking at Oakley and saying, no, they can't win a fourth in a row. They're definitely going to have to go through XYZ to get there. They're going to have to beat some good teams. They're going to have to play. I think Butte County will be pretty good again next year. I think that they have a chance to be a really, really solid football team. I don't know Grace as well as you do, so I'll defer to you on that one. So they're still going to have to win some games. There's still going to be some challenges. But am I going to be completely shocked if we're sitting here again 1 year from today and we could basically, roll this show again talking about Kendrick won the Division II and Oakley won the Division I state tournaments? I'm not going to say that's off the table. I think that that's very much on the table. Yeah,
I completely agree. The pieces are in place, certainly, for both of those teams to at least be competitive again next year. One last note on Oakley. I was down on their sideline a little bit during the championship game, and they had, ball boys and water boys and, from like middle school to like 5th, 6th grade to like a 3rd grader. And, they all had their names on the back of their shirts.
Oh, let me guess. You recognized all the names, didn't you?
Yeah. So it was Beck and Cranny and Jones. So, I mean, it's the way it goes in a place like Oakley. There's just more athletes on the way, which was, I thought, a cool deal. Let's talk about Grace. They had a great season playing in, I believe it was like their 2nd or 3rd championship ever. I could be wrong on that. I know they've never won the championship before, so to get there and not come through, I know it's disappointing, but Grace fans should be very proud of the way their team played all year long, a 9-2 record. We talked about a lot. They were kind of the unknown team throughout a lot of the season. You couldn't find film of them anywhere. You couldn't, you didn't have any stats or info on what was going on with them. So we did finally get some stats at the end of the year from Grace. Their athletic director was kind enough to send them to us, and it kind of paints the picture. We were kind of missing a couple of puzzle pieces, and now it's all put together, and we see some pretty impressive performances.
Yeah, Dallin Draper, that young man very quietly had himself one hell of a season. And, hopefully he gets the accolades that he deserves based on, he had 100 tackles this year, which, okay, yeah, they played 11 games, but how many times did he play maybe a half of those games? And then he had, between rushing and receiving, over 1,000 yards and somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 plus touchdowns. And that was one, again, I like to take like these informal, text coaches. Hey, what do you think? What do you see? And I reached out to a couple of coaches about the 1A Division I, and I said, do you see a key? And both of them, without hesitation, came back and said, Dallin Draper. If Grace is going to win, they need Dallin Draper to have a great football game. If Oakley wants to win, they've got to contain Dallin Draper. And I think for the most part, Oakley won that chess match. I don't think Draper played a poor game by any stretch of the imagination. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. But I think Oakley achieved the objective of not letting him get too loose and have quite as big a game as he had the week or the 2 weeks leading up to that game. But what an impressive young football player that kid is, and good size, good speed, good athleticism, and he had a really, really good year, and one of many. Titan Anderson played well in the postseason. William Michelson, the running back, he ran for almost 900 yards, averaged about 10 yards a carry over the course of the season. Those things don't happen if you're not pretty good, you know what I mean? And the proof is in the pudding. Only one team was better than them in the 1A Division I classification this year.
Yep. And so, you look at what they lose. They lose Dallin Draper, the great tight end, H-back, linebacker. He basically set up residency in the Cammy I backfield in that semifinal game. The Cubs had a real tough time blocking him. So Dallin Draper is gone. Titan Anderson, the quarterback, is gone. Ty Gilbert, their top receiver in DB, is gone. Tegan Taggart, two-way starter on the line, is gone. Will Mickelson, the running back, is gone. But they bring back some decent pieces. They bring back the twin brothers, Joe and Kai Clegg, and they both play on the line, offensive and defensive line. So that's a good starting point. Brennan Sorensen caught both touchdown passes from Titan Anderson in the championship game. He'll be back as a senior. They've got a really good sophomore running back named Trevor Matthews, and he kind of just got action here and there as situations dictated. I think he could really explode next year. Trevor Matthews, as a junior, really kind of taking over that backfield. And then Braden Kimball was a sophomore that played a lot on defense this year, and he's listed as a quarterback, so he could definitely be maybe the QB of the future, but I would expect big things from him next year as well. So Grace's, yes, they're losing some very, very good players at the top, but we heard it all year from Grace fans and coaches, team effort, right? So they're going to be just fine again next year, I feel like.
Yeah. I think they'll be very competitive, and I think that entire division has a chance to be very competitive. As we mentioned, Butte County is a team that I would have up in the mix of the teams that if I'm getting out in front of projecting who I think could win a state championship next year, I'd put Butte County in the conversation. Grace may be in that second tier right now, but before you get mad at me, that's probably where they were coming into this year too for me, and they proved me wrong. Chalice made some strides this year. Their challenge is always going to be numbers. Do they have enough numbers? But they've got some athletes and they've got some size, and if they can keep building, they're going to be a tough out here sooner rather than later, I think. So that, District 5-6 there has a chance to be a pretty tough league.
Yeah, there's certain teams that you can look at just because they were younger this year, right? And project that, okay, they might be pretty decent, next year. Again, you've already hit on Grace and Oakley and Kendrick, and I think Garden Valley is a team at the D2 level that could be pretty awesome again. Lighthouse Christian, I think, only had 2 seniors this past year, Will. So they're going to be a
lot of athleticism. Very, very fast, very athletic.
Yeah, and even Murtaugh. Murtaugh started a sophomore at quarterback this year in Sawyer Young. They lose some really good linemen up front, but they bring back some good players as well. So I think especially the D1 ranks, District 4 again is going to be just a juggernaut of a division. So we'll see. And Valley was really young, A lot of sophomores.
Yeah, a very sophomore-heavy team there for Valley as they made their return back. And you mentioned Garden Valley. Since we're talking valleys, Tri-Valley is a team that I think next year has a chance to move forward. Garden Valley really impressed me, and they do lose a few players when you're talking about Jaden Hunt and Aaron Noakes. They do lose some pieces, but they've got a lot of good young players coming back. They're going to be a handful. A team that, you get up into District 1 and 2 as far as next year, it's kind of been the Mullen-St. Regis show in recent years. And now that, the Caleb Ball graduates, the fine quarterback slash defensive back slash wide receiver a little bit, now that he's gone and Stetson Spooner and Jesse Allen may have to retool things a little bit there, is that an opportunity for Clark Fork to finally overtake them? Is that an opportunity for a Lakeside or a Wallace to maybe jump up and make a move? So I think there are a lot of opportunities available. Then you get into District 2. Deary, Timberline, and Lewis County could all take about 3 steps forward and still be 3 steps behind Kendrick on paper right now. A lot can happen between now and then, injury-wise and whatnot, and we're not cheering for any injuries, but boy, in D2, Kendrick just they look like they're going to be really tough to take down next year.
Yeah. You mentioned Clark Fork. They do return Ethan Howard and Chase San Roman to that backfield. So, they're going to be right there. It's going to be really interesting to see how everything shakes out next year. I can't believe we're already talking about next year. We haven't even, the dust hasn't even settled yet on championship weekend, but
that's how it works, right? You just,
oh
God, I thought you were trying to get rid of me there.
No, sorry. I hit the exit button. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm really anxious to the All-State League or the All-State teams, the All-Idaho teams coming up here in a couple weeks. They usually come out, early December. The Idaho Statesmen, they get votes from all the coaches and they compile those teams. And there are going to be some really interesting choices. I don't know that there's a runaway. I think in Division II, I think your player of the year is either Ty Kep or Cody Power. And I think you can make cases for both of them. And I don't think either one would be a bad decision. In Division I, I don't know that there's a guy. You know what I mean? I think there's a lot of guys that it could be. And there are a lot of guys, a lot of players that can make a good case. And I'm going to be really interested to see what the coaches ultimately end up deciding.
Yeah, for D2, I'm inclined to agree with you there if it's Kep or Power. I kind of lean Power just because he's a senior and he did post more impressive statistics, not because Kep isn't as good, but because Kep literally went like an entire month without playing a full game at one point, and they had a lot of games get called early, and so body of work, I lean Power. At the D1 level, I think Dallin Draper is a great candidate that we talked about from Grace.
He should be. If he's not, he should be.
Yeah, and I guess we'll find out if the lack of attention during the regular season impacts that at all. I guess we'll see if that pans out or not. The other guy I think could be is Colton O'Kane from CAMI. He rushed for 1,300 yards this year, was an impact player on both sides of the ball. He's a sneaky guy I'd keep an eye on too. But
the one from CAMI that I thought about a lot was Porter Whipple, the lineman. Dean Johnson won it a couple years ago and deserved every minute of it. But, Whipple finished the year with somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 sacks, which is crazy in 8-man football where most teams run more than they pass. I mean, he was just straight up beast. And then, he's one of those guys that I think could be in the conversation as well. And we can keep, does Carter Woodland and notice, is he a kid? Because you talk about kids that statistically had a hell of a year. Carter Woodland is one of them. Eli Hill had a tremendous year for notice. How does that all break down when coaches start voting, when they start submitting their votes? I think that there's, anywhere from a half a dozen to 8 kids that you could probably sway me. If I'm sitting in a boardroom and you're coming in to pitch to me, I think there are probably about 6-8 kids that you'd have a pretty good chance of selling me on in Division One.
And in terms of just video game numbers, Terrell Ellenwood Jones from Lapway. I mean,
crazy numbers. Yep.
Yeah, for sure. So anyways, yeah, that'll be a lot of fun to keep an eye on as we get into December as well. But that'll do it for season 2 of the Idaho 8-Man Prepcast. This will be our last Prepcast of the year. We'll go away into hibernation, and we'll come back right around the middle of August.
Up. You got a U-Haul to load up, young man. You're not going into hibernation.
Right. Well, for the 8-Man Prepcast, we're going into hibernation for the off season. It's been a lot of fun. Will, thanks for doing this every week. I know you're an incredibly busy guy, and so for you to carve out time in your schedule to do this every week, I know I certainly appreciate it, but all the fans that tune in as well really appreciate it. So
I appreciate the inclusion. It's fun to talk a little football. I enjoy it.
Definitely. And again, you can keep track of all of the 8-Man news and notes and things that are going on, even though the Prepcast won't be here. The Idaho 8-Man Twitter account is going to be busy as ever. So make sure you give that a follow on social media and Twitter. So,
thank you. Same to you, at Brandon Baney, right?
Yeah. Yep. So, all right. Well, that'll do it. Thanks to all the 8-Man fans that tuned in all season long. Thanks to all the fans that reached out and interacted. It was a lot of fun. Trading barbs with the Raft River fans. That's where I picked them to lose. And, it was a lot of fun. We do everything in fun. And so this is one of our most popular podcasts, and for good reason. The 8-Man game is as strong as ever in the state of Idaho. So,
yes.
All right. Well, happy Thanksgiving, Will.
Same to you.
And everybody that's traveling for Thanksgiving this week, travel safe. Hopefully you get to where you're going and back home in one piece. And we will see you next year. Thanks for tuning in one final time to the Idaho 8-Man Prepcast. For Will Hoenike, I'm Brandon Baney on IdahoSports.com.